This video is an exploration of the area around More Hall and Broomhead reservoirs north of Sheffield.
They were constructed between the years of 1913 and 1929.
In order to support their construction, a whole railway line was built connecting the Great Central Railway with the Ewden Valley.
A whole village was built for the reservoir workers.
And today we're going to explore what remains of that railway and that village nearly 100 years on. So the track of the old Woodhead line, Deepcar and Oughty Bridge in that direction, Oughty Bridge in that direction, and the line we're following, which led down to the Ewden Valley, is just 20 yards parallel to this line. It doesn't look much like a railway existed less than 100 years ago. These days it's quite rocky, it's quite narrow, and because it was taken out of action nearly 100 years ago, as I say, very little remains of it. But once we get down to the Ewden Valley, where they started building the dams just before the First World War, the evidence of the railway becomes a lot more apparent.
Yeah, magnificent to see this still down though, isn't it? Even though it's no longer in use, it looks like it could be.
Yeah, this part looks very usable, but as we've seen other videos going further up the line towards Deepcar, and where we ourselves explored the other day up at Fox Valley Shopping Centre at Oughty Bridge, very weedy and very overgrown. So I wonder if this line will ever be used again. If we take a look at this map from 1924, we can see the Ewden Valley Railway branching off south from the Great Central Railway before sweeping round. We weren't sure if we're on the right trail, but we've overlaid our Strava map, and the red line on the right absolutely follows the old Ewden Valley Railway. So we're now on what we think to be the track bed down to the Ewden Valley to enable materials to be brought in to build those two reservoirs we're going to have a look at. You can see there's been quite a lot of activity in the years since the working stopped for the two reservoirs. We've got a pipe here and some art on there, Sol. Very nice and bright blue. We might have a little bit of sleeper remains there. Hard to tell, so little of it remaining. We've come across a shaped piece of stone down there. Also been worked at some point, possibly off a bridge. Not quite sure what that is though. Another possible old sleeper there that's been repurposed as an ersatz bench for people to sit in these woods. So at some point, we think this is it, the line had to come down off the level of the Great Central line and down towards the main road and across to the Ewden Reservoir. It's a little bit of a drop. A little bit of banking, or maybe a drainage channel being put there. I wonder if that was to keep rain from coming down off the ridge there onto the line. Yeah, I think we've got banking on that side. We've got a slight banking dropping down there, and we're on the flat, the track bed of that temporary railway line that lasted about 16 years in terms of its operational use. You can appreciate quite what a drop it was from where the main line went up there down to where it had to meet the workings for the More Hall and Broomhead reservoirs down there by walking up this steep hill to go and catch the line at another point about 400 yards further down from where we just were.
There's only two major impediments for this line to cross.
And one's just in front of us, the River Don, so let's go and see how that was done. Yep, the River Don, we can see this quite high bridge crossing over it. It is in quite a poor state of repair. There's parts of it rotting away and it'll need some remedial work so it lasts a few decades longer. So we've got one brave volunteer from the channel, and it's not me, to go down and get some footage from underneath the bridge. If you think that is worth a like, this daring do, this bravery in going down this steep embankment, then please drop this video a like. Dawn would love it.
So it's quite steep, this embankment, so if you do come down here, be very careful. Wow, look at that amazing structure. I think this is about as far as I'm going because I'm not going to slide down there into the river. And now I'm going to make my way back up that embankment.
So that's the underside of the bridge done, thanks to Dawn. The top side of the bridge, as you can see, these girders are sticking out here. It's beginning to rot away. We've got a nice hole. You can actually see the River Don under there.
I think at some point this bridge might be closed.
More evidence of rotting. I said earlier, yes, it'll need some work doing for it to last another few decades. But yeah, this is where the trains ran towards the main Manchester-Stocksbridge Road in front of us. So across the River Don, and then a couple of 100 yards further on, we've got to find some way of crossing the main road. That goes from Sheffield to our left, up to Stocksbridge and on to Manchester at the time, to our right. And to our left and our right here, we have some water treatment works. So why build this railway line and why build these reservoirs? Well, in the late 19th century, Sheffield had had a few outbreaks of cholera, and the Sheffield Corporation, what we call the council these days, considered it was necessary to have a more reliable supply of fresh water for the inhabitants of Sheffield. So they selected this site to the northwest of the city where the Ewden Valley was, and planned to build two large reservoirs, the More Hall Reservoir and the Broomhead Reservoir. And in order to get materials to build it, the nearest available main railway line was the Great Central, and yeah, it was just a couple of miles off there. So this short branch line was constructed. Now, given the fact the branch line was only in operation for about 16 years, you'd think nothing is going to be left of it. But earlier in the week, I paid a visit to the Stocksbridge archives, received a warm welcome there and much useful information. So thank you to the people I met there. And the first piece of evidence we're going to use that I gleaned from the Stocksbridge archives is a picture of the bridge that crossed the main Sheffield to Manchester road in front of us. Here we can see it rising quite a distance over the road to Stocksbridge.
So we've just dropped down off the trackbed now, and you can see the embankment behind us.
That's right, and this is where it crossed the main road. So there should be a little bit of evidence, maybe a little bit of the wall of the bridge still left. The bridge is long gone, but we think the wall that held it up is still there. So just opposite us, you can see the wall where the line went across. You can see the embankment on the far side of the road, the embankment on this side of the road. So above our heads, about 100 years ago, there would be a railway bridge. I'll put a picture of it up on the screen now. Thank you to Stocksbridge Archives. So I managed to find a gap in traffic going across the main road. You can see the wall here. You can see something was placed in these holes here at some point in the past. And a large embankment on the other side. Just entering the site of the More Hall Reservoir, which is actually a private road, but you can usually get up it. The water authorities allow that. We've got these lovely entrance gates. They look from the right sort of period, about 100 years ago, to enter this working estate. Now, what fired my imagination about this isn't just a disused railway line, it's the fact that in order to build the reservoirs, they had to bring in a workforce. I think somewhere between 400 and 500 people. There were families, there were individual workmen, and they all had to be housed in Ewden Village, which is about 2 miles in front of us. So where we're standing now was almost like a little interchange. The train used to come down from the valley up at Ewden Village and then deposit people here. So as well as goods coming in, there were people, and there was a More Hall sidings, I think, on this side of the line. And again, thanks to the Stocksbridge Archives, we have a picture of people coming off the train and getting onto buses to take them into Sheffield for all their shopping and business needs. So yeah, standing at a tiny interchange that was in operation about 100 years ago.
So the embankment, you can still see it there. It runs along, but it's very overgrown at the moment with all the summer foliage. So probably better to come back in the winter when this has died down a bit to get a proper view of it.
That sounds like a challenge, doesn't it, folks? Let's go and get close up to this embankment. So you can see the embankment about 10 yards in front of me. Quite steep really. So here we go. Would have had little steam trains, one called the Ewden, running up and down here between, I believe, 1913 and 1929. In fact, when the railway entered the Ewden Valley at this point, there were at least two lines, the main line here and a subsidiary line going near the course of the river. You can see some of the trackways branching off here as the dams were being built. And the engine used on the line was known as Ewden. It was a Manning Wardle number 1860, built at the Hunslet Works near Leeds. Not quite sure what colour it would have been. Does anybody know from these photographs? So there's quite a wide area of land, maybe about 20 yards in width between that wall there where More Hall Lane rises and the area where the track came into the Ewden Valley. And we've been here several times in the past to run round, to walk round, but we never thought of all the activity that was happening here.
So from here you can see the embankment getting closer and closer to the road.
Indeed it does, and about 50 yards in front of us it becomes the road. Managed to find a picture from the Sheffield Independent 1929 which shows a road being laid alongside the tracks. Now, I was given to understand that the train stopped running here in 1929, but looking at later maps, including one from the late 1940s, it still shows the track as being down. I'm not sure if it continued to be used for any remedial works that were needed, but I think the track actually closed for use in 1929. But as I say, some later maps do have it still there. Does anybody know if it continued to be used after the construction of these reservoirs was completed?
I think it came out of here looking at this.
Yeah, we're just at the line now. There's a little pull-in place for cars here.
I think this is where it came out.
It is where it came out, because if we look back,
yeah,
you can see the line.
Oh, yeah.
All that foliage there, coming along there, and the railway track, tramway, would have carried on right in front of us along the line of this road. There are quite steep embankments on that side, dropping down to what is left of the Ewden Valley, and steep cutting on the other side, so you can see the general shape of the land will be coming down in a quite gentle slope. Then they've cut down into it to allow the track to be laid where we're walking, and then a steep dip down to the other side. In fact, the Ewden Valley had been considered quite a beauty spot to the north of Sheffield before the coming of the reservoirs, and indeed it did excite some comment in the Sheffield newspapers, with correspondents complaining of a despoilation of such a beautiful natural environment, although acknowledging the need for a fresh water supply for the city. About half a mile up from the Manchester Road, we have these lovely towers at the start of what became More Hall Reservoir. Very Gothic looking. And here in front of us we have More Hall Reservoir, the first of two reservoirs constructed between 1913 and 1929. And the line of the railway continued off in that direction towards Ewden Village and the Broomhead Reservoir. So where now people are fortunate enough to take leisure drives, once trains ran along here. The whole valley throbbed to the work of stonemasons, of people in the sawmills, of people brought to the area not just from Yorkshire but from all around Britain to work constructing these two large reservoirs. So what are these people and where they lived? So yes, Ewden Village isn't quite as famous as the village that was built by the Ladybower Reservoir for all the workers there. However, there was a substantial settlement here, and it wasn't just a few huts. There was a mission hall, there was a canteen, there was a shop. It was a thriving little community back in the day. We managed to find a few stories about that community that lived and worked here, building those reservoirs in the 1910s and 1920s. So we have some more modern housing here now. We don't think any of the original huts still remain. I think the last one was still up in 2008, but it wasn't a listed building, so even that has gone now. But we're just climbing up the road now, which would have led us to Ewden Temporary Navvy Village. So in 1915 I found a report about the opening of the mission hall here. It's not something you'd think to build these days, where workers gather for some temporary contract work. But back in the time of the First World War, religious culture, Christian culture in the United Kingdom was tremendously important. In fact, one of my other interests has been religious culture in 20th century Britain, and I've written a few books on the subject. So no surprise to find a navvy mission up in this settlement of about 400 to 500 souls. Here we have a picture of the mission house and the picture of its opening in 1915 at a service conducted by the Bishop of Sheffield and attended by the great and the good. And there was a full report in the paper about how the Sheffield Corporation was not just ministering to the physical needs of the people who worked up there, but also the spiritual needs too.
I like the steps.
I think the village originally went on further from where the modern houses are. We found a set of steps here. Amazing to think, less than 100 years ago there was a whole community here going to the canteen, playing snooker and billiards, and now we've just got this plantation and a few steps remaining. The workers were housed in these wooden huts, some containing whole families, others run by landladies where single men lived throughout the time the reservoir was being constructed. I have a feeling the steps we've just walked up might be these which led to the village shop, which was run by the Stocksbridge Cooperative Society. As you can see, was very well stocked. So the buildings are made out of timber rather than tin, and when the main works had finished in 1929 there was discussion in the Sheffield press as to whether they should just be pulled down because you didn't need people now to be building the reservoirs, or whether they should be kept as housing in a pleasant rural part of North Sheffield and people should continue to live there. And that's what actually happened. If you look on a map of the late 1940s, you'll see most of the buildings still in existence. And yeah, when I went down the Stocksbridge archive, I was told that buses used to continue up the Manchester Road and then bring people up here too. There's also a rather fine social area which sold drinks on site, including alcohol. The idea being that if the mainly male workforce were here selling drinks, they could be monitored, their behaviour monitored, rather than going out and around Sheffield and perhaps causing trouble and bringing the waterworks company into a bad reputation. Also, the housing, as you can see, was of pretty decent quality. Walking in the footsteps of a community that lived, worked and thrived here over a century ago. After construction had inevitably slowed during the First World War due to the lack of available manpower, come 1919 it was back in full swing. An advert here from the Sheffield Daily Telegraph asking for navvies, advertising excellent accommodation in the model village, good wages and bonuses. Possible site of a substantial building here. Maybe the canteen, the shop, the mission hall itself. The building of the reservoirs was far from straightforward. There were many landslips and leakages, and the major one seems to have occurred in 1924 when, I'll put the figure up on the screen, but many thousands of cubic yards of earth, I think 400,000 cubic yards of earth, slipped down from the banking that over there into the Broomhead Reservoir. It had to be dug out, and rather than rebank it on this side for it to slip down again, it was dug out and placed on the other side, the south side of the reservoir. And all in all, although the reservoir was meant to be completed in 1929 and there was a grand opening where Arthur Greenwood MP, Minister of Health, turned up, there was still plenty of remedial works to be done, and they reckon that all the work that had to be done to put the reservoirs right after they're opened cost as much as the original building of the reservoirs itself. Found a report of the Sheffield Corporation looking to borrow £150,000 for more remedial works to be done to put right things that weren't working properly, leakages, slippages. An amazing runoff area here, Broomhead Reservoir just over there. Broomhead Reservoir looking pretty low at the minute, but across there was where the massive land slippage was in 1924. with all the earth that fell into the reservoir having to be scooped out and put over on this side behind us. So walk across the dam wall, Broomhead there, and you can just see off in the distance More Hall, about a quarter of a mile down the valley. Another tower very similar to the one we found down at More Hall. We believe the railway came all the way up here. We're at the start of the Broomhead Reservoir, the dam wall there, and the railway ran further up to enable all the stones to be taken up to build the reservoir upstream. In this video we've shown you the remains of the Ewden Railway, we've shown you the remains of Ewden Village, but before we finish there's one final piece of the former picturesque Ewden Valley which still remains, but not in its original situation. 100 years ago, this very picturesque packhorse bridge, which we believe dated back to the early 1700s, stood in Ewden Valley. Due to objections about it potentially being destroyed and lost forever, each stone was individually numbered and the bridge transported a mile or so down the road towards Sheffield, and it was reconstructed in Glen Howe Park, and it can still be seen there to this day. We hope you've enjoyed joining us on this exploration of the Ewden Valley. If you have, please give this video a like, and we hope you can subscribe and join us on our future historical explorations.
So please join us next time, where every journey begins with a path to the past.